When a man begins to miss someone more than he expected, silence becomes his first companion. In the beginning, he may not recognize it. The silence arrives quietly, in between moments when he would normally be distracted. It sits with him at night when the world slows down, when conversations end, and the noise of daily life fades into the background. In that silence, something begins to surface, something he has not faced before. Missing someone has a way of stripping away distractions. It removes the external noise and turns his attention inward. The mind, once filled with movement, begins to reflect instead of react. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. The mind resists it. It tries to fill the gaps with thoughts, music, messages, or work. But when he misses someone deeply, none of those things satisfy the space that has opened. The silence becomes louder, almost alive. It is as if the absence of sound carries the presence of feeling. The more he tries to escape it, the more it follows him. Eventually, he stops running from it and starts listening. That is the moment silence begins to turn into a mirror. In that mirror, he begins to see himself without filters. He notices the things he said, but did not mean, the moments he could have been more present, the words he could have spoken with more honesty. Silence reveals the parts of himself that were hidden beneath pride and distraction. It shows him how often he confused stillness with indifference, and how often he mistook emotional control for strength. He begins to understand that true strength is not found in suppressing what one feels, but in being able to sit quietly with it. Silence also reveals what was real. When the noise of the world fades, only truth remains. He begins to see what truly mattered in that connection beyond appearance or circumstance. He sees that missing someone is not about possession, but about resonance, the echo of shared moments that continue to live within him. It's not the presence of the person that creates the longing, but the energy that was exchanged and now lingers in memory. Silence allows him to revisit those moments without the interference of ego. He begins to see how his mind reacted when his heart was trying to speak. The mind likes to control, to label, to justify. But silence does not speak the language of logic, it speaks through awareness. It doesn't offer explanations, it offers space. In that space, emotions rise to the surface, not to punish but to purify. Missing someone becomes a process of cleansing. The noise of distraction dissolves, leaving behind clarity. What once felt like pain begins to turn into understanding. He starts to realize that silence was not empty after all. It was full of everything he had been avoiding. Sometimes he notices how silence amplifies the smallest things. The way a certain song feels different now, the way time stretches when he thinks of her, the way he catches himself reaching for his phone without reason. Each of these moments is a reflection. They show him where his attachment lies, where his longing hides, and where his truth is waiting to be acknowledged. Silence does not give answers, but it invites awareness to arise naturally. It invites him to see the difference between missing someone and being dependent on them. In this mirror of silence, he begins to understand that missing someone is not a weakness but a form of truth. It reveals how deeply he is capable of feeling, how much of his being is connected to another's presence. He starts to understand that the pain of missing someone is not a punishment, but proof of love's depth. The mind tries to reduce it to logic, to timelines, to reasons, but silence shows him that the heart does not follow such rules. It expands and contracts according to its own rhythm. As the days pass, silence becomes less of an enemy and more of a teacher. It teaches him patience. It teaches him to breathe before reacting, to observe before assuming, to feel before speaking. He learns to listen to what silence is saying, not through words but through stillness. It tells him that missing someone is not something to fix, but something to feel. It tells him that every longing has a message, that something within him is ready to grow, ready to evolve, ready to understand love in a deeper way. Through this silent reflection, he begins to soften. His pride melts, his defenses lower. He becomes more aware of his emotions, not as weaknesses but as guides. He sees that the more he resists feeling, the more he distances himself from truth. But the more he allows silence to show him what he feels, the more he returns to balance. Silence is not empty, it is full of unseen movement. It is where emotion turns into understanding and where longing becomes self-awareness. He may not realize it consciously, but missing someone has changed his relationship with silence. It has turned it from something to escape into something sacred. It has become his mirror, showing him not only who he misses, but who he truly is beneath all the noise. He begins to see that silence is not absence, it is presence in its purest form. It does not take away, it reveals. It does not weaken, it awakens. And in this awakening, he discovers that what he thought was emptiness is actually depth. That what he thought was loss is actually remembrance. That in missing another, he has found a doorway into himself. Through the mirror of silence, he begins to understand that every emotion, even longing, is an invitation to return home, not to someone else, but to the truth within himself that he had forgotten to listen to. When a man starts to miss someone more than he expected, the first battle he faces is not with the absence of the other person, but with the noise within his own mind. The ego speaks first. It tells him he is fine, that he doesn't care as much as he thinks, that he can easily move on. It tells him that missing someone is weakness, that to long for someone's presence means to lose control. The ego tries to protect him by pretending he is untouched. But the truth moves quietly underneath that surface, and it waits for the noise to tire itself out. Missing someone has a subtle power. It begins to melt the walls he built around his feelings. It exposes how fragile those walls truly are. The ego is built from the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. It thrives on control, pride, and separation. It tells him he doesn't need anyone, that detachment means strength. But when he misses someone more than he planned to, that story begins to break. The mind can lie, but the heart does not. He feels the ache in his body, the restlessness in his thoughts, the emptiness in his routines. No matter how much the ego tries to convince him that he is indifferent, the silence of longing proves otherwise. The more he misses, the more he realizes that his emotions cannot be governed by logic. The mind resists, but the heart persists. This is when the dissolution begins. The ego does not vanish in an instant. It softens slowly. At first, he may fight it. He may distract himself with work, with social noise, with false certainty. He may seek validation from others, hoping to bury the vulnerability he feels. But missing someone is a kind of inner mirror. It doesn't allow him to lie to himself for long. The image he sees reflected back is raw and unfiltered. He begins to see his pride for what it is, a shield built to avoid pain. And he starts to notice that this shield is now what keeps him from feeling alive. When the ego begins to dissolve, the sense of control fades, and with it comes discomfort. He starts to question himself, not in a way that weakens him, but in a way that humbles him. He remembers words he spoke carelessly, emotions he dismissed too quickly, and moments he took for granted. The ego does not like humility because humility strips away its illusions. Yet through this humility, he begins to see the beauty of honesty. Missing someone deeply forces him to admit what he truly valued, what he truly desired, and what he truly fears losing. It brings him face to face with his own depth. As the ego softens, the world looks different. He notices things he didn't before. Small gestures, shared silences, unspoken understanding. These details rise to the surface not to haunt him, but to teach him presence. The more he remembers, the more he sees that the ego was never protecting him, it was isolating him. It made him believe that caring less was safer, that feeling less was wiser. But the ache of missing someone shatters that illusion. It shows him that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a form of truth that ego cannot touch. Sometimes he feels anger rise. He tells himself he should not care. That anger is the ego's final defense. It tries to rebuild the walls that are slowly crumbling. It tries to cover sadness with pride, tenderness with indifference. But as time passes, the effort becomes exhausting. He can no longer keep pretending. He begins to sit with his emotions instead of resisting them. That sitting, that quiet acceptance, is what breaks the ego's hold. He begins to realize that his emotions are not enemies. They are messengers carrying lessons that logic alone cannot deliver. As the ego dissolves further, compassion takes its place. He starts to understand the other person's perspective more clearly. Instead of blaming or analyzing, he begins to feel. The rigidity of judgment softens into empathy. He sees how his actions were influenced by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of being too open. Missing someone humbles him because it reminds him that love cannot be possessed or managed. It can only be felt and respected. The mind may still struggle, but the heart begins to speak more clearly through silence. He starts to notice that the moments of missing are not just about the other person. They are reflections of his own growth. every longing uncovers a layer of himself he had ignored. The ego, which once dictated who he should be, begins to dissolve into something more fluid, more aware. He starts to see that strength is not found in emotional distance, but in emotional honesty. What he once called control was actually avoidance. What he once called detachment was actually fear. Missing someone deeply is what makes these truths visible. In the stillness of reflection, he learns that love and ego cannot coexist for long. One expands, the other restricts. The more he feels love, the less the ego can dominate. The more he tries to hold on with pride, the more love slips through his fingers. This realization humbles him deeply. He begins to understand that to truly connect, even in absence, he must let go of the need to be right, to appear strong, to maintain distance. Missing someone becomes a quiet surrender, not to another person, but to his own truth. And so, the man who once prided himself on control now learns the power of surrender. Not a surrender of defeat, but of awareness. The ego dissolves not because he forces it to, but because he no longer needs its armor. He begins to see that behind the mask of independence, there was always a longing to be understood, to be seen without defense. Missing someone reveals that longing. It strips away the unnecessary layers until all that remains is sincerity. He learns that connection cannot exist through ego, only through presence. As his mind settles into this new space, the dissolution of ego becomes freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from escape, but the kind that comes from acceptance. He is no longer pretending to be untouched. He feels everything, and through that feeling, he becomes more grounded, more awake, more human. Missing someone no longer feels like a burden. It becomes a passage, a quiet, transformative process that turns pride into humility, control into awareness, and distance into understanding. When a man begins to miss someone more deeply than he ever expected, his mind becomes a landscape of memories. They rise without warning, in the quiet of early morning, in the rhythm of a familiar song, in the scent of rain, or in the echo of laughter that no longer fills the room. These memories are not random. They come as gentle reminders and, at times, as painful reflections. At first, they feel like waves crashing against him, each one pulling him further into the past. But as he sits with them, as he stops fighting their presence, something subtle begins to change. The memories that once felt heavy begin to shift in meaning. They start to transform from moments he longs to relive into lessons he is meant to understand. At first, he might resist. The mind clings to what it cannot have. It replays conversations, wondering what could have been said differently. It replays choices, wishing for a different outcome. This repetition is the ego's attempt to rewrite the past, but memory does not exist to be rewritten, it exists to be understood. Every memory carries a message hidden beneath the surface of emotion. When he allows himself to truly look at those moments without judgment or denial, he begins to see patterns, not only in the relationship but in himself. He sees how his reactions were shaped by fear, how his silence came from pride, how his distance was a defense, not a decision. The lessons do not arrive all at once. They unfold slowly through reflection and acceptance. He starts to realize that the people we miss most are often the ones who mirror back our blind spots. They awaken the parts of us that we hide from ourselves. In missing her, he is not just revisiting the connection, he is revisiting his own evolution. He begins to see that every laugh, every disagreement, every quiet moment together carried within it a teaching about love, about patience, about communication, about honesty. Memory becomes his silent teacher, guiding him through the unspoken curriculum of emotional growth. He remembers how he reacted when she withdrew, how he responded when she expressed her feelings, how he handled the moments of misunderstanding. Each recollection becomes a window into his inner world. The past, when seen through awareness, becomes a mirror that reflects his maturity. He begins to understand that missing someone is not punishment, it is the heart's way of urging him to look deeper. It asks him to stop romanticizing what was lost and start learning from what was lived. There are moments that sting more than others. The memory of words spoken in haste, the moments of indifference when he should have been attentive, the times when his pride mattered more than connection. These memories come not to torment, but to teach humility. They show him how easily love can be taken for granted when the mind is distracted by ego. They show him how quickly a person can slip away when attention fades. And yet, within that pain, there is wisdom. Because once he understands what those moments meant, he begins to change the way he shows up in every relationship, not just with her, but with everyone he meets. He learns that love requires presence, that communication is not about winning arguments but about understanding hearts, that attention is the highest form of respect. He realizes that memory is not just a recording of what happened, but a library of insight. Each recollection, once examined with honesty, becomes a teaching that refines him. The more he reflects, the more he sees that the relationship was not a failure, it was a teacher disguised as experience. It revealed his limitations so that he could grow beyond them. He begins to see the subtle beauty in how memories change shape. What once brought pain now brings perspective. What once caused regret now brings gratitude. This shift happens when he stops asking why it ended and starts asking what it taught me. Memory becomes a kind of meditation. In remembering, he observes himself, how he loved, how he feared, how he opened, how he closed. The repetition of these reflections becomes the rhythm of growth. Sometimes he wonders why certain memories remain so vivid. It is because they still have lessons he has not yet absorbed. The mind will continue to bring back what the heart has not yet understood. When he accepts that, the weight of remembering lightens. He no longer tries to escape the past, he learns to listen to it. Each image that arises in his mind becomes an opportunity to practice awareness. Instead of feeling trapped by the past, he begins to extract wisdom from it. Instead of running from the ache, he begins to honor it as part of his unfolding. He notices that certain memories no longer hurt the way they once did. They now feel softer, like old photographs, reminders of where he came from, not chains that hold him back. That softening is the sign of learning. Pain only repeats itself when lessons are ignored. Once the lesson is learned, the memory transforms from burden to blessing. The same moment that once made him ache now makes him wiser. It teaches him empathy for himself, for others, for the fragile nature of human connection. He learns to thank those memories, even the painful ones, for showing him the truth. They revealed the difference between attachment and love, between reaction and response, between control and surrender. He understands that every memory that returns is an invitation, not to dwell, but to awaken. Missing someone becomes less about wanting them back and more about recognizing what they helped him discover within himself. And so, through reflection, he evolves. The moments that once defined his sorrow now define his understanding. Memory becomes the soil in which awareness grows. Each recollection refines his perception, shapes his empathy, and deepens his patience. What once felt like loss begins to feel like guidance. Every scene that replays in his mind becomes another lesson in love, in impermanence, in acceptance, in humility. He realizes that he cannot change what happened, but he can change how he sees it. The past remains the same, but his relationship with it transforms. The more he learns, the more peace he finds. What once pulled him backward now pushes him inward. What once hurt him now helps him see himself clearly. The story does not disappear. It becomes wisdom carried quietly in his heart, teaching him how to move forward differently, how to love more consciously, and how to live with awareness that every memory, whether joyful or painful, holds a purpose that unfolds only when the mind becomes still enough to listen. When a man begins to miss someone more than he expected, the first wave that rises within him is desire. The yearning to feel what once was, to hold what is no longer there, to bridge the distance that absence has created. Desire, in its earliest form, is raw and restless. It consumes the mind with imagination, with longing, with endless what-ifs. It feeds on the memory of connection and the hunger to experience it again. At this stage, the mind is not seeking understanding, it is seeking relief. The ache of missing someone transforms into a chase within his own thoughts. But desire, if left unfulfilled, eventually burns through its own intensity. It cannot sustain itself forever. And when the flame begins to dim, what remains is not emptiness, it is clarity. This is when desire begins its slow transformation into awareness. In the beginning, he confuses desire with love. He believes that to miss someone is to need them, that to crave their presence is to prove the depth of emotion. But as the days pass, he begins to see that desire is not love, it is attachment disguised as affection. It is the mind's attempt to recreate what it once experienced, even though the present moment no longer holds it. He notices how desire makes him restless, how it ties his emotions to something beyond his control. The more he desires, the more he suffers. The more he clings, the more distant peace becomes. This realization does not come easily. It emerges slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. He begins to notice the patterns of his own longing, how his mind revisits the same memories, how he replays conversations in search of comfort, how he fills his thoughts with the image of the person he misses. These repetitions become a mirror, showing him how desire operates. It seeks possession. It wants to hold, to define, to claim. But love in its truest form asks for none of that. Love breathes, desire grasps. Love gives space, desire clings. This contrast begins to reveal itself to him through his own discomfort. The very pain of missing someone becomes the teacher that dissolves illusion. As time moves, the intensity of desire starts to shift. The more he observes his emotions instead of reacting to them, the more distance he gains from their pull. He starts to understand that he does not miss the person alone. He misses how he felt when he was with them. That realization changes everything. It directs his gaze inward rather than outward. Instead of trying to reclaim something external, he begins to ask what within him is longing to be seen, what within him feels incomplete without the other. That inquiry marks the beginning of awareness. Awareness grows in silence. It does not demand, it observes. It watches the flow of thoughts without chasing them. It allows emotions to rise and fall without trying to hold them in place. Through awareness, he starts to witness his own attachment as if from a distance. He sees how his desire to reconnect is actually a deeper call to reconnect with himself. The person he misses became a mirror for his own sensitivity, his tenderness, his capacity to love, qualities that still exist within him, even in their absence. The mind tries to grasp at the form, but awareness reminds him that the essence remains. There is a subtle turning point when longing loses its desperation and turns into reflection. He stops asking how to bring the other person back and starts asking what this experience is showing him. He realizes that every emotion, even desire, carries intelligence. The H is not an enemy, it is a messenger. It points toward areas of his being that seek completion. Through missing someone, he begins to meet himself. The more he understands this, the less he suffers. Awareness transforms the energy of desire into insight. What once pulled him outward now draws him inward. He starts to see that desire, when unconscious, creates attachment, but when observed, creates understanding. The same energy that once burned with restlessness now burns with light. Awareness does not destroy desire, it refines it. It transforms the hunger for possession into a deeper appreciation of connection. He learns that true love is not about having someone. It is about recognizing the presence of love itself, whether or not that person remains. This understanding softens him. It takes him from needing to experiencing, from chasing to observing. In moments of stillness, he notices how the longing changes shape. It no longer feels like a wound, it feels like a pulse. A quiet reminder of his own capacity to feel deeply. The same emotion that once tied him to the past now anchors him in presence. Desire used to make him restless, awareness makes him still. Desire used to close his vision to everything but what was missing. Awareness opens his eyes to the life that continues around him. He sees beauty in small things again, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of his breath, the calm of solitude. These things were always there, but he was too caught in desire to see them. Through this transformation, he learns that missing someone was never just about the other person. It was a lesson in awakening. It showed him how attachment distorts perception, how craving blinds clarity, and how awareness brings freedom. He realizes that desire is not something to be rejected, but something to be understood. When observed, it becomes a path that leads from illusion to truth. When felt without resistance, it dissolves into understanding. The same energy that once drove him to reach outward now becomes the force that draws him inward. Desire becomes the bridge between longing and self-discovery. The ache that once felt unbearable becomes a form of meditation. Each wave of emotion that rises within him becomes an opportunity to stay present, to observe rather than react. He learns to sit with the feeling of missing someone without trying to fix it, without trying to control it. In doing so, the emotion loses its power to dominate. It becomes transparent, still there, but purified, and slowly he begins to realize that awareness is love in its purest form. It does not seek, it simply sees. It does not grasp, it understands. Through awareness, he begins to feel connected not only to the person he misses, but to everything around him. To the breath, to silence, to the movement of life itself. What began as desire has now transformed into understanding. What began as longing for another has become a deep recognition of himself. In that recognition, he no longer feels the need to possess or to chase because he has found something greater than desire. He has found awareness that simply is quiet, steady, and awake. And when a man begins to miss someone more deeply than he imagined he would, something subtle begins to shift within him. At first, it is the mind that takes control. The mind searches for explanations, replaying every detail to understand why things unfolded the way they did. It calculates, analyzes, and rationalizes, believing it can think its way out of emotion. But missing someone is not an equation that logic can solve. The more he tries to reason with his feelings, the more he realizes that logic offers no comfort. The heart, however, remains patient. It waits in silence for the mind to exhaust itself. And when the noise of thought grows quiet, the heart begins to speak. Softly at first, then with the steady clarity of truth. This is when the heart becomes the mind's teacher. The mind and the heart speak different languages. The mind speaks in thoughts, the heart speaks in feelings. The mind wants control, the heart seeks connection. The mind fears uncertainty, the heart embraces experience. When he begins to miss someone deeply, these two voices start to conflict. The mind tells him to move on, to detach, to protect himself. The heart tells him to feel, to remember, to stay open. For a while, he obeys the mind. He distracts himself, keeps busy, hides behind routine. But there comes a moment when even distraction feels empty. The emotions he tried to suppress rise to the surface, uninvited but undeniable. That is when the teaching begins. The heart does not teach through logic. It teaches through presence. It teaches through the quiet ache that lingers when he remembers a touch, a glance, a moment of stillness shared with another soul. It teaches through the tenderness that remains long after words have faded. Missing someone becomes the classroom of awareness, and emotion becomes the lesson. Each feeling that arises, sadness, regret, longing, love, becomes a page he must read slowly. The heart guides him to sit with these emotions instead of escaping them. It teaches him that pain is not punishment, it is communication. It is life's way of reminding him that he is capable of depth. When the heart begins to teach, it does not demand understanding right away. It simply asks for honesty. It asks him to admit what he feels without judgment. The mind resists this because it fears vulnerability. But the heart knows that healing begins with truth. So it keeps guiding him back to the present, back to sensation, back to breath. In this stillness, he realizes that missing someone is not only about the absence of another. It is about the rediscovery of his own capacity to love. The more he allows himself to feel, the more he understands that emotion is not weakness, it is wisdom in motion. He starts to notice how his perception changes when he listens to the heart. The mind measures everything in terms of gain and loss, right and wrong, success and failure. But the heart measures differently. It does not ask, "What did I get?" It asks, "What did I experience? What did I learn? How did I grow?" Through that shift, he begins to see the relationship and its absence, not as something broken, but as something sacred. A teacher that brought him closer to understanding himself. The heart teaches him compassion, first for the one he misses, then for himself. It shows him that empathy is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of inner strength. As the heart continues to guide him, he begins to feel life more vividly. The smallest things carry deeper meaning. The warmth of sunlight on his skin, the sound of wind moving through trees, the rhythm of his breath as he walks alone. These sensations remind him that love does not end when connection changes form. The love that once flowed outward now flows inward, and through that redirection, awareness blooms. The heart teaches him that love is not confined to another person. It is a state of being that lives within him, waiting to be expressed again and again in different ways. He realizes that the heart's wisdom cannot be forced. It unfolds with patience. It teaches through repetition, through the rising and falling of emotions, through moments of stillness and moments of chaos. Some days he feels at peace, other days the ache returns. But now he understands that each wave carries its own message. The heart teaches resilience by allowing him to break open and rebuild. It teaches humility by showing him how little control he truly has. It teaches surrender by reminding him that life moves with its own rhythm, and resistance only deepens suffering. As the heart becomes the mind's teacher, a new harmony begins to form within him. The mind learns to serve rather than dominate. It begins to interpret emotion not as disorder, but as guidance. Instead of silencing the heart, the mind starts to listen. Together, they find balance, logic informed by love, thought softened by feeling. This integration changes how he sees everything. He becomes more patient, more aware, more compassionate. Missing someone no longer feels like chaos, it feels like awakening. He starts to understand that intelligence without emotion is empty, and emotion without awareness is blind. The mind may know facts, but the heart knows truth. The mind sees events, the heart feels meaning. When he looks back, he sees how the heart has been teaching him all along, in every moment of connection, in every silence, in every goodbye. The lessons were always there. He simply needed to be quiet enough to hear them. Through this awakening, he begins to respect the power of emotion. He no longer hides from it or judges it. He lets it move through him, allowing it to shape him into someone wiser, softer, and more present. The heart has taught him that feeling deeply is not something to be feared, but something to be honored. It has shown him that love, even when it hurts, expands the boundaries of awareness. It has taught him that the mind's greatest strength comes when it finally learns to listen to the wisdom of the heart. And so, what began as confusion turns into understanding. The edge that once clouded his thoughts becomes the light that guides them. The silence that once felt heavy becomes the space in which clarity grows. The heart, once dismissed as fragile, becomes the very force that teaches the mind how to see truth without distortion, how to think with compassion, and how to understand that wisdom is not the absence of feeling, but the union of thought and love moving as one. When a man begins to miss someone more than he expected, it feels at first like a kind of loss, a void that stretches between what was and what remains. The mind interprets it as something missing, something broken, something incomplete. But as time passes and the noise of longing settles into stillness, something deeper begins to emerge. He starts to realize that missing someone is not only about absence, it is also about discovery. It is a quiet teacher, one that strips away pretense, softens pride, and invites reflection. What begins as pain slowly unfolds into awareness. The ache of missing someone becomes the soil in which his inner growth begins to root itself. In the beginning, he resists it. He tells himself he should be stronger, more detached, more in control. He distracts himself with movement, work, conversations, noise, anything that fills the silence. But no matter how far he runs, the feeling follows him. It lingers in small details, a song that once meant something, a familiar scent, a memory that appears without warning. He begins to understand that missing someone is not something he can escape, it must be faced. And in that confrontation, growth begins. Because to face longing is to face himself, his emotions, his expectations, his capacity for attachment, and his relationship with impermanence. Missing someone forces him to slow down. It demands that he pause and look inward. It exposes the areas of his life where he has been unconscious, the parts of him that rely too heavily on others for validation or comfort. It reveals how deeply he depends on external connection to feel whole. This realization can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is necessary because only through awareness of his dependence can he begin to cultivate inner stability. Missing someone becomes the mirror that reflects his need for grounding, for self-understanding, for balance. The mind often interprets absence as emptiness, but the heart knows that absence can be sacred space. When someone is gone, what remains is not just their memory, but the echo of what they awakened within him. He begins to see that the longing he feels is not a punishment, but a signal. It is pointing him toward parts of himself he has not yet developed. Perhaps he misses the sense of peace he felt with that person, the feeling of being understood, the sense of belonging. But as awareness grows, he realizes these qualities were never given to him. They were awakened desires within him. They are his to reclaim. Missing someone becomes the process through which he learns to find within himself what he once sought outside of himself. Each day, he feels the ebb and flow of emotion. Some days, the ache feels sharp and consuming. Other days, it softens into nostalgia. This fluctuation is part of his transformation. Missing teaches him impermanence, that emotions, like tides, come and go. That pain, when observed rather than resisted, moves through him and leaves clarity in its place. He learns patience. He learns that healing cannot be forced. It unfolds quietly through acceptance, through reflection, through time. As he continues to walk this inner path, he notices something else changing. The person he misses begins to take on a different meaning. They are no longer just someone he longs to have back. They become a teacher. Through their absence, he learns presence. Through missing them, he learns awareness. Through remembering them, he learns gratitude. What once felt like loss begins to feel like initiation. Missing becomes not a hole to fill, but a doorway to growth. He begins to observe how missing someone reshapes his values. He becomes more mindful in his relationships, more attentive, more aware of the fragility of moments. He learns to listen with his whole being when people speak, to appreciate the quiet in between words, to cherish connection without taking it for granted. Missing teaches him what presence truly means, to be fully here, fully engaged, fully alive. The absence of someone he loved teaches him the importance of being awake while people are still near. He also learns emotional maturity. At first, missing feels like dependence, a craving for someone else to fill the void. But as he grows, it becomes self-responsibility, an understanding that his emotions belong to him. He realizes that the intensity of missing is a reflection of his own depth, not his weakness. The more he accepts this, the more peace he finds. He no longer fears his feelings. He begins to honor them. He learns that love does not disappear when people part. It simply changes form. It becomes understanding, empathy, compassion. Missing someone teaches him humility. It humbles the ego that once believed it could control love or time or connection. It reminds him that life is fluid, that nothing remains fixed, and that beauty often lies in transience. It softens him in ways pride never could. It teaches him to hold gently what he cannot keep, to appreciate rather than possess. He begins to see that the ache of longing is not a sign of weakness, but of depth, a proof that his heart is alive, capable of great feeling, capable of evolution. The more he grows through this process, the more he understands that missing someone is not separate from love. It is love continuing in another form. It is love learning to exist without attachment. It is love learning patience. It is love learning acceptance. And in that acceptance, something powerful happens. He begins to feel connected not just to the one he misses, but to everything around him. The same awareness that once focused on absence expands into appreciation for presence. He feels connected to nature, to silence, to life itself. He realizes that every wave of longing carries wisdom if he listens deeply enough. Each emotion points him toward greater understanding of himself. Each ache shows him where healing is needed. Each memory shows him what matters most. Missing someone has transformed from sorrow into guidance. It has turned from emptiness into expansion. It has taught him that growth does not always happen in light. Sometimes it happens in the quiet spaces between love and loss. And so, what began as heartache becomes transformation. Missing becomes meditation. Longing becomes awareness. Pain becomes strength. Through this journey, he learns that love's truest purpose is not only to connect him with another person, but to connect him with himself. Missing someone becomes not the end of connection, but the continuation of it, a path that leads inward, where growth takes root, where awareness deepens, and where he learns that even in absence, the heart continues to expand